let's jump into the recap. And if you're new to us, what we like to do is recap every episode to, this long form content. I think the last 2 episodes have each been 5 hours long. Sometimes it's nice to just have a little refresher. So we'll jump into that. And I forgot one final announcement. And Blake, I don't know if we actually haven't talked about this, so I'm hoping you're going to be able to be there. But for anyone that watches Legend of Vox Machina, we're going to do a watch party. So if you want to watch it with us this Thursday at 6 p.m., because that ends up being when the episodes drop on Prime. 6 p.m. Central, so whatever that is for you.
I unfortunately don't have a Amazon Prime account, so
we can figure something out.
I'm glad we're hosting this, and one of the co-hosts doesn't have the means of actually watching it. So
we'll work something out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Definitely join us for the watch party. Anyone's welcome. It's we're just chill. So
yeah, and
I think you linked the Discord too in a previous video for people who want to follow up info there too.
Yeah, and we'll post it down below, or whatever people do. But yeah, lost my train of thought. Oh, the recap. So yeah, do a quick recap. I think Blake's gonna start us off today, and then we'll jump into our theory and discussion after that. Oh yeah, we cut the recap. Sorry, this is jumbled as heck, but we cut the recap out and host that separately. So if you're watching that recap right now, but you want to hear our thoughts, I will link to the video of our full discussion below.
Yep. So let's talk about what happened in episode 12 of campaign 3 of Critical Role. And this was another 5-hour episode, which I'm always so torn on. A part of me is like, yes, more Critical Role. Then the other part of me is like, it's going to be a late night.
Yeah.
So great episode. Really enjoyed it. What ends up happening is the episode opens up with the stinger that we left with in the previous episode of Imogen finding this study on red storms with the pages ripped out and her mother's name as one of the contributors. Now, if you don't remember, she's never met her mother. She doesn't know her mother. Her mother is either dead or missing or disappeared a long time ago. It's still kind of hazy on the details.
Right.
But her mother is a contributor to this study. So immediately Imogen asks one of the scribes, who's sort of like the librarian-esque assistants who help people find things. What's going on here? Why are these pages ripped out? And the scribes is surprised by this because the Starpoint Conservatory, remember, it's you have to be an academic, you have to be a scholar, you have to get admission into it. And so it's not just like your random, maybe public space where anyone can just go in and take something. Well, come to find out that the scribe, even though he probably shouldn't share this, shares that the last people to check out this book were the late Loomis twins, who seemingly were the ones who ripped out the pages. So what ends up happening is Imogen takes this information. She does ask about the person who wrote the study, a Professor Khadija Sumal, and the scribe mentions this person doesn't work here at all, isn't part of this place. And actually, she realizes that this person is from the city of Eos, which is way south in Marquette, past the Hellcatch Valley. And this is also the same place that Astani, the friend of Shad's, is also from, which gets mentioned in a little bit later. So she comes out, shares this information with the party. Everyone is a bit like, wow, that's a really crazy coincidence. And they decide, okay, at some point we're going to need to double back and maybe check out the Loomis house again and see if we can find these pages. And that actually does happen later in the episode, which we'll cover. The party also is realizing, hey, this ball's coming up. We really need to get our attire, our outfit ready. And they recall that in the Lucid Spire, there was a place known as the Golden Veil that they passed by. It seemed to be a place, I kind of think of it as like the D&D version of David's Bridal. It's like
Men's Warehouse.
So they do make their way there the next day. And they do have a brief stop where they check on Zidana and
make sure
all
she's
that
alive.
basically. Yeah, make sure she's not dead. Matt actually has this really great moment where they walk in and they have Zidana, who this is the woman that Imogen and Lana are staying with, where she's in a chair, seems to be dead, and the party, everyone kind of panics, but she's just sleeping, so it's all okay. But so they make their way to the Golden Veil, and I don't remember the person's name who runs the Golden Veil. Let me find it here.
Doesn't it start with like a Q?
Seamstress Quatel.
Quatel, yeah.
And she, right off the bat, is like, "Oh, welcome. You've come at the right time. There's a huge event happening." And the party's like, "Yes, we know the ball. We're actually going to the ball." Yeah, and Dorian also, like, they're thinking like, "Okay, so maybe we should just grab something." And Dorian's like, "No, no, no. Like, guys, a ball like this happens maybe once a year, sometimes maybe even once a decade. Like this is and I kind of got the vibe of, I think he maybe even mentioned like a wedding, but I even thought of like a quinceanera, like a just pivotal moment in someone's life where they would go out and get something really nice to wear.
Yeah.
He basically communicates that, like, hey, we can't just mess around with this. But he does add the detail, you should get something that matches basically your vibe, like who you are. Don't try to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
So they start looking around. Chetney actually finds this really dapper outfit and is like, what's this going to cost? And Seamstress Quatel is like, all of that with alterations, about 85 gold. And he's like, what? And so he runs back to the party and he's like, this place is not cheap. Like, we need to really think about this. So they actually talk about maybe renting the outfits, and they ask Seamstress Quatel about this. And she's not offended, but she's also a bit kind of like really? Yeah. And she says basically for 10 gold, you can rent an outfit, but you have to take it as is. And so they're like, I don't know if I want to do that. As they peruse through, Imogen actually does find this really, and I'm going to kind of just spare us all from like describing outfits because I'm not good at any of that, but I would call it just like a very modest, humble dress, really. And this cream colored dress, and it runs her 35 gold. And so they're like, okay, yeah, that's actually not too bad. So they all find their own little spice of flair, I guess, like their outfits. And FCG actually, they have to custom make him something to wear. And I don't remember the details. There was something about like legs or something. Or do you remember what they were talking about there?
So he got transformed into a turtle in that fight with Ira, and he was like, I really liked having legs because he like had never had legs before. So Chetney is going to carve him some legs out of wood so that he can like have wood legs for this fancy event.
And actually, that's a great. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because Imogen also. I don't know if this was later or not, but Imogen also points out to FCG, hey, I've never heard of the polymorph spell working on non-living things. You can't like polymorph a chair into an animal. Like it only works on living creatures. And FCG is like, what are you trying to say? And the implication is, hey, maybe there's more to you than meets the eye. And he actually does share, I don't want to tread on Will's details because I think he shares twice in the episode about his party. Well, he does mention a little bit more about his troop. He talks about his purpose is referred to as his designation. It's kind of like his what's been programmed into him to do, and he mentions again that's to help people basically. It even points out to Seamstress Quatel what her designation is. Like, what's your purpose? What are you doing? And really. In this conversation to the party, mentions that, actually later on, he actually goes into detail as to who all the people were in his party, other than just like these random items that Dancer loved.
Yeah.
And I'll leave that to Will actually in a little bit. But they get all their stuff paid for, and they decide, you know what, we probably need some healing potions. We need some stuff. Let's go head over to the Trove of Marwah, which is something we haven't seen yet. It's basically this. I think of it as a like when I would go to the beach as a kid, and there'd be like the pirate ship you could go into and like explore.
Yeah.
The vibe that I got, but it's basically an airship that is we find out got brought here via a storm and was basically dropped into Dressar years before. And as they walk into this ship, they realize that it is a hoarder's dream. There seems to be just random stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And essentially, as they're kind of going through all the junk, they come across this young woman who is the shopkeeper, Marwah Indalia. And this is a shop that her and her father started. She's in her early 20s. We come to find out her father has since passed away. And so now she kind of just does her best to manage the store. And she's a bit of a quirky, almost I kind of have like this sense of like almost like a mad scientist vibe of because later on they return, or actually Lana returns, and she's actually like tinkering and like messing with stuff, kind of like in an alchemical way,
Yeah.
or rather maybe like a like an artificer kind of way. But they all have all sorts of different things that they want. They want a couple of healing potions. The thing about Marwah is everything she has, she's not quite sure what it is. Like this isn't a very organized store at all. So she does find these 2 potions that she brings up, and she's like, I think these are healing potions. I don't know. Fern smells one and says, yeah, that's a healing potion. FCG actually ends up casting Identify to figure out like what some of the stuff is. And one of the things that gets pulled out is this vial that when they open it, smoke starts to billow and fill up the room. And they find out this is I'm going to butcher it now because I don't remember what the name of it was.
It was like the
ever smoking bottle or something.
Yeah, I think that is what it was.
So they find that Laudna gets something, right? That
I'll cover it later.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's right, because that's later, right? And also FCG asks for, at this point, they're all going through their spell component list, like on their D&D sheet, being like, what do I need?
Need this.
Yeah. And so FCG's like, I need a model of a ziggurat, I mean, it's like a handful of things.
Yeah.
And Marva's like, I have a copper wire. I think I have the eyeball, and like finds the eyeball, and it's just a plain eyeball, but ends up selling him some clay creepy dolls that he decides is going to try to fashion into this model ziggurat. So they're basically just trying to get their components purchased. And then they do also buy the sort of self-climbing rope. And I apologize that I'm butchering a lot of the ways these things are referred to, but they do buy the rope. And then was there anything else that they got, Will? I can't remember.
I don't think so. I think that was all of it. They did buy one of those mystery potions at least, but I think that was it. And then
one of them turns out to be a healing potion that gives resistance to poison.
Right.
Then
Laudna comes back and buys something later.
Right. And then I think doesn't FCG try to buy an outfit for Pate?
Oh yeah,
like a tux or something, or
Ashton does. I think she goes and finds like a super creepy doll, and he just buys that.
Well, all that to say, that's basically what happened in the first half, and I apologize that it was pretty much all over the place. So many random details. I was like, oh yeah, then that happened. But Will, why don't you take it from there?
Yes, sir. No worries. You did great. Alrighty, so we pick up from the break, and when we cut back, the party is basically still trying to come up with a group name, and they do this a few times throughout this episode, and they don't really land anywhere yet, but they do come up with focus group, like being like focus comma group. Like there's a couple of different meanings for it, so they seem to like that, but they don't commit to it. Anyway, Imogen and Orem decide to go back to the Loomis household in order to follow up on the fact that Imogen found out the Loomis twins were the last ones to rent that book that she was researching. And meanwhile, Ashton's like, all right, well, I'm going to go make my mask for the ball. And everyone's like, wait, we need masks? And he's like, yeah. So Orem and Imogen make their way, and they find, is it Ella or Ela? The matriarch of the Loomis clan. I always forget pronunciations, but they find her outside. As
Mama Loomis in my mind.
We could just call her that.
Grandma. I don't know.
So yeah, they find Mama Loomis outside, and they decide to just be like completely open and honest about this. And so they fill her in and ask her if they could, take a look around the twins' study and see if they can find anything. She allows them to do this, and she takes them to their study, their lab, and it's like this massive lab of like several different floors. They have like a huge telescope, and we know them to be fascinated with like planetary stuff, so this all checks out. And so they spend like the next hour or so kind of investigating, and they just find notes about the history of Exandria, the different planes, planetary things, but nothing regarding what Imogen was researching, and they do not find the ripped out pages either. So then they ask Mama Loomis if when the twins, were their bodies were returned, like if they had their personal effects on them, if they had, perhaps any research on their personal selves. And she says that, she thinks everything they had was returned and there was nothing like that. And she refers to Astani again, which is this family friend that was actually with them at the time of the attack. She says Astani has not returned, but they sent back, the bodies and all their belongings, and I don't think Astani would have like kept anything from me. So they're like, okay, thank you so much, and they let her know that they're actually going to go to the site of the attack, and they tell her that if we find anything out, we will let you know as soon as possible. And then she gives them a pin, and she says, "Here, take this, and when you see Astani, show this to them, and they will know that you have my blessing. You're associated with me."
Right.
So then we cut back, and by the way, everything that happens for the last half of this episode takes place over like several days. The party just has like a few days to kill before the ball happens.
Right.
So we cut back, and I think it's been a few days later at this point, and FCG, Blake mentioned this, but FCG reveals he has this innate ability to identify things. I think he can do it once a day. And so that's when he identifies the green potion is indeed a healing potion and makes you resistant to poison. And then he crafts the ziggurat that he needs, and it ends up looking very phallic because he rolled pretty poorly, but it is revealed that it will work.
Yeah, I think Fern was like, it looks different than I thought it would. Or like, I can't remember what she says, but.
And so also in this time, Chetney decides to ask FCG about his associates because, he was really strange about it in the Golden Veil when he asked the shopkeeper. He's like, "Oh, you have associates? Tell me about it." And so Chetney was like, "What's that about? Who are your associates?" And FCG reveals again that Dancer was their maker and made all of the associates, but we also get a few new names, at least I think, that are new. He reveals that there is someone named Terrawin and notes that they were skilled with earth. Someone named Ozine, and he describes as a fighter with water and like used water abilities. And then Axer, who used an axe. And FCG basically, he kind of tells the same story that we're already familiar with, but just that this creature had one eye, attacked him and his squad, and he just wants justice. And he didn't see much because he was still like waking up out of stasis, so he missed it, and just doesn't know much besides the fact that the creature has one eye. So Imogen's like, "Hey, you know what? I could cast detect thoughts on you if you like focus on those memories, and maybe I can pull something out that is like obscured for you." And FCG's like, "Sure, we can try." So he starts thinking about it. She casts detect thoughts, and she's not able to see anything. She is basically just able to glean what he's already told them. And she recognizes there's some sort of block in his mind, either trauma or like an emotional scar, but something that's preventing her from actually like seeing anything. So this was just a cool sequence, but the most fascinating thing is at the end of it, Matt tells Sam, "Hey, you take 2 points." And there's no other context given besides that, which, like, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later.
Yeah. He's like, "I'm making my 2 death rolls now." He was just kidding, but.
So then.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that in the discussion. So then we cut to Imogen, and she's going to return to the Starpoint Conservatory over this, days they have free. And she's actually going to go look up some things for Laudna. Because, again, Imogen is the only one allowed inside due to the little note they got from Eshtaroth. So Laudna basically wants to know everything she can about the Briarwoods, everything about having, like, a dead woman's voice in your head, how to get a dead woman's voice out of your head, and can you do that without losing your powers? So Imogen goes to the Starpoint Conservatory, and she actually brings FCG with her under the ruse that, it's her automaton assistant. Right. And so they do actually allow FCG in with her. And they do research, and she basically learns of Silas and Delilah Briarwood, that they were exiled/hunted and fled to Taldore, where they killed the Derolos and took over. A group known as Vox Machina ousted them and are thought to have killed them. But then there are more notes talking about the Whispered One and the Briarwoods and more events tied with Vox Machina, but they're very vague and unclear. So then she researches, arcane gifts and abilities and like patrons and all that stuff, like how people gain powers. There's various means that people gain powers through bloodlines, through patrons. There are experiments that have tried to give people powers, but those are highly illegal and shut down as soon as they are found out about. And she also learns that if you do have like a patron type relationship and you sever that relationship, you do also lose the powers for the most part.
Right.
So then we cut to a night just in the middle of the night, and Orym wakes up Fern and Dorian and asks Fern about the Nightmare King and asks her, like, hey, he knew you. Like, what's up with that? And she says, you know, my family is very well known. We weren't members of the court, but we were basically royalty. And she's like, so, you know, he might have just known us. And she also said he might be like Imogen, so maybe the Nightmare King got into her head, and that's how he kind of found things out. But she says everyone in the Fae has a great sense of smell, so it's not like weird that he smelled me.
Yeah.
She claims she claims that she doesn't know what he would want with her, and thinks that maybe he knew her parents or her grandma. And she says, you know, we shouldn't worry about it. But Orym does an insight check, and he can tell that she is a little bit worried about it. Then we cut to Imogen, who is having another one of her patented Red Storm nightmares. And Laudna kind of wakes up as this is happening and starts taking notes to try to see if she can like help Imogen figure anything out. So in the dream, the same thing happens where the storm comes and begins like tearing up everything. Imogen hears what she thinks to be her mother telling her to run. And this time she can see a silhouette of two young adults in the distance, holding hands and basically embracing the storm. And, you know, Imogen runs and eventually wakes up. And Laudna's like, you said the word twins. And so they kind of talk about it for a minute and are like, maybe it was the Loomis twins? And she reveals that seeing people in the dream like this is not something that normally happens. Bertrand was the first one she had ever seen. So she's like, do I just see dead people now?
I see dead people.
Yeah. But she also reveals, and I think Blake touched on this, that Imogen never knew her mother. That was something we'd like kind of been wondering about as the show had gone on. But yeah, she reveals she never knew her, never met her, doesn't know anything about her. Her dad didn't like to talk about it. All right. So then we cut back to the whole crew at Milo's, and they have gathered to fashion their masks. But before this, Laudna returns to Marwah's Trove and brings her a pastry as a sign of friendship. And she actually buys this blood-filled egg-like item that Blake and I were talking about earlier. And she kind of negotiates a little bit, gets a deal for 300 gold instead of 350. And basically what this is a blood-filled vial of a +1. And essentially what it does is it gives her spell attacks and spell saving throws for sorcerer spells +1. And once a day, she can regain 5 sorcery points when she rerolls her hit dice. So a pretty cool item. And they basically have like a blossoming friendship, Laudna and Marwah. And Marwah's like, bring me a pastry every time you come see me. And she's like, okay. So back to the masks. This is just a fun little scene where everyone makes their mask, and I'll just run through it really quick. Dorian makes a mask out of fabric hardened to look like it's blowing in the wind.
A paper mache almost.
Yeah.
With like a cloth over it. Sorry,
yes, I was trying to think of what that was called. Paper mache. I remember doing that in school.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Laudna makes a mask that is kind of like this weird fox mask that kind of matches the coat she got.
Well, like taxidermied coat or whatever.
And she also takes the doll suit and puts that on Pate. FCG just says, I get some big glasses, Clark Kent style, and that's all he has. Fern says she makes like a 5-year-old child's craft, like Thanksgiving turkey type of mask. Imogen says she's a really simple cream-colored leather mask that has beads that kind of like come up over and down her hair. And Orym grabs a chunk of discarded wood from what Chetney had been using and carves himself a wooden mask with like cherry blossoms. And Chetney is like, oh my God, like I have so much more respect for you. I didn't know you could carve. And they basically have a fun little moment. And Orym, is like, I would love to get some tips from you and moving forward. And finally, Ashton takes like this cloth and leather and fashions this mask that like goes over his entire face. He cuts some slits for his eyes, and I think the crystals on his skull are like the only part of him that's showing. His entire outfit as well covers like all of his skin and everything, and he reveals that he basically looks like the Nightmare King. So that was pretty cool.
And he rolls pretty well too, where Matt's like, yeah, you actually pull it off. So
yeah, Matt had everybody roll for their masks to see like how well they did it at crafting them. And yeah, Ashton rolled like a 21, I think. And then finally, what also happened in this moment is Chetney reveals his first toy has been finished. He carved the airship that Dorian asked for, and Travis literally pulls out a wooden airship on set, and this was so cool, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh!" And it was just a fun moment. So from there, we go to
naturally Fern steals it. So.
yeah, Fern does steal it.
Yeah. Anyway,
that was great. So then it's the day before the party. The party goes to Estros's to kind of catch up and, you know, get the lowdown. And he reveals that he has managed to get invitations for everyone to go to the ball, but they must attend as two separate groups. One that will be coming like under him, and then another that the party is going to have to craft a noble persona, and they're going to go with that crafted persona. And he basically reveals like, hey, just one of you is going to have to pretend to be somebody and y'all can pick. But he also kind of describes, you know, again, what they're there for. And he describes kind of the political landscape and mentions the Shonday Quorum again as these 8 anonymous people who rule from the shadows, and that they have a 9th member that is public facing, everyone knows, and kind of just speaks for them. And that this is Gavis Aranda, I think I'm saying that right. And that Gavis has been in that position for about a decade. And he's like, you know, discovering who any of these secret members are is very powerful information. They only care for their own interests at the cost of the common people. And Estrosh basically just reveals that, like, I really want to find out who these people are, expose them, and disrupt this power imbalance. Right. And they believe that Armand Treshy is possibly a member. So Estrosh proposes this plan that they should plant this ring on Treshy, and he presents this silver ring that matches one that Armand has, and it's magically imbued. So they're like, yeah, we need to somehow switch his ring for this one. And so they're like, come up with a plan for that. And he's like, I've arranged transportation, so just come here tomorrow and, you know, we'll go. And he's like, but I need to know who's going to be the noble persona that we're crafting. Like, which one of you is going to do that? Because I got to set that up tonight. And so the party talks about it a little bit, but they ultimately land on Dorian because they're like, you know, Dorian, you are noble, so why don't you just do it and like as yourself? And he's a little hesitant at first, but he eventually decides, okay, you know what, I'll do this. But Estrosh, can you ensure that like my family will be okay? You know, his brother who has this big bounty on him and everything. And Estrosh says, you know, this comes with inherent risk, but I'll do everything in my power to like keep you guys safe. So Dorian's like, okay, I'll do it. But he says, you know what? Let me look through your stuff, because I think I'm going to change my mask and my outfit if we're doing it this way. So Estrosh leads him up and kind of shows him this wardrobe, and Dorian takes his mask that he made earlier. And also the clothes he was going to wear were from EXU. He didn't actually buy any clothes at the Golden Veil. He already had a really nice shirt. So he takes that as well, crumples them up, throws them down, and instead takes something from Estros's wardrobe. And then the party's like, okay, so Dorian's going to be the guy. We got Estrosh. Who's going with who? And so we have Team Dorian, which is Dorian, Orim, Fern, and Imogen, and Team Estros, which is Ashton, FCG, Laudna, and Chetney. Then they spend a while trying to think about, okay, how are we going to do this ring swap? And they try to come up with plans. They don't land on anything concrete. Right. And so they're like, okay. And they go to sleep that night. The next day, meet up with Estrosh, head to the ball, and that's where the episode ends.
Whew. That is what happened in episode 12. Thank you for hanging with us. Yeah. So many important details that just could not skip. But like Will mentioned at the start, this is part of its own separate recap. If you've got to the end of this video, check out the link below for the whole deep dive.